Whispers in the Suburbs. Part 1. It was a long time ago, perhaps 10 years or more, when I first moved to Maplewood, a quiet suburban town just outside of Chicago. I was fresh out of college, barely scraping by, and had taken a tutoring job to make ends meet while figuring out my next steps in life. Maplewood had that typical American suburban charm. Tree-lined streets, neatly trimmed lawns, and a false sense of security that came with living among people who smiled at you but never truly knew you. The houses were uniform, each one a variation of the same architectural template. Yet behind each door, there were lives tangled in secrets, betrayals, and unspoken desires. I rented a small apartment in a duplex owned by the Hendersons, a middle-aged couple who had lived in the neighborhood for over 2 decades. Mr. Henderson was a retired firefighter, the type of man who spoke little but commanded attention when he did. His presence was solid, like an old oak tree that had weathered many storms but was starting to show its age. Mrs. Henderson, however, was the opposite, lively, warm, and full of carefully concealed longing. She had a way of making you feel seen, as if every word you spoke was of the utmost importance. Their son, Tyler, was struggling in school, particularly in math, which is how I ended up in their home several evenings a week, tutoring him in their spacious living room. At first, it was just another job, another way to pay the bills. But soon, I began to notice things. How Mrs. Henderson would linger in the doorway a little too long. How her perfume would trail behind her like a whisper of something forbidden. How she laughed at my jokes with a touch more enthusiasm than necessary. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just a harmless dynamic between a lonely housewife and a young man who reminded her of a past version of herself. But deep down, I knew better. And then, one evening, everything changed. Part 2. It started with small things, gestures so subtle that I could have dismissed them as nothing if I had wanted to. During one of our tutoring sessions, Tyler had dozed off on the couch, exhausted from football practice. I was about to leave when Mrs. Henderson appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "Just a small drink before you go," she said, her voice smooth, her gaze lingering a second too long. I hesitated, but took the glass. The air between us shifted. She sat across from me, curling one leg under the other, her silk robe slightly parting to reveal the smooth skin of her thigh. I swallowed hard, keeping my eyes on my drink. "You remind me of someone he used to know," she said, stirring her wine with a lazy swirl. I forced a chuckle. "Someone good, I hope?" She tilted her head, studying me. "Someone who made me feel alive." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I should have laughed it off, should have found an excuse to leave. But I didn't. I stayed, caught in the moment, in the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass, in the way the dim lighting softened the sharp edges of her face. After that night, everything changed. She started texting me, not overtly inappropriate messages, but enough to make me second-guess their meaning. "Hope you're having a good day," felt too personal. "Tyler has practice tonight, so I'll be home alone," felt too deliberate. When I arrived for tutoring sessions, she'd find excuses to sit closer, to brush past me in the narrow hallway, to let her hand linger on mine just a fraction of a second too long. One evening, as I was packing up my books, she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think about things you shouldn't?" I met her gaze, my pulse quickening. All the time, I admitted, regretting it the moment I said it. She smiled, satisfied, and walked away, leaving behind the scent of vanilla and something else, something darker, more intoxicating. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing I had stepped on a dangerous ground. But instead of backing away, I kept going. Part 3. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of evening where the air felt charged with something unspoken. Tyler had left for a weekend football camp, and Mr. Henderson was working late. When I arrived for our usual session, the house was unusually quiet. Mrs. Henderson greeted me at the door, barefoot, her silk robe loosely tied around her waist. "You're early," she said, tilting her head slightly, a playful glint in her eyes. I hesitated. Should I come back later? She shook her head and stepped aside. "No, stay. I could use the company. I walked in, my footsteps feeling heavier than usual on the hardwood floor. The house smelled different, like candle wax and something floral. I noticed the dimmed lights, the single glass of wine waiting on the coffee table. "Tyler's not here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She smiled. "No, just us tonight." I should have left. Every rational part of me screamed at me to leave. But I didn't. We sat on the couch, and she poured me a glass of wine, watching as I took a sip. "Do you ever feel like life didn't turn out the way you expected?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. I exhaled, setting my glass down. "Yeah, all the time." She studied me for a moment, then reached out, brushing her fingers lightly over the back of my hand. "You remind me of something I lost," she murmured. Her touch sent a jolt through me. I could have pulled away. I could have laughed it off. But instead, I turned my hand over, letting our fingers intertwine. Her breath hitched. "If we do this," she whispered, "we can't take it back." I leaned in, my heart hammering. "I know." Then, before I could think better of it, our lips met. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, exploratory. But then it deepened, and suddenly, nothing else mattered. Not the consequences, not the betrayal, not the fact that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Her hand slipped into my hair, pulling me closer, and for a moment, I let myself forget everything else. But just as suddenly as it began, it ended. A sound. The front door clicking shut. We froze. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Mr. Henderson was home. My heart slammed against my ribs. Mrs. Henderson's eyes went wide, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. "Go," she mouthed, barely making a sound. I scrambled up, grabbing my bag, and slipped out the back door just as the living room light flicked on. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap. I stood there for a second, my breath fogging up in the darkness, my body still trembling from what had just happened. I had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. Part 4. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, Mrs. Henderson, breathless, her lips swollen from our kiss, her eyes wide with something between fear and excitement. And then I saw Mr. Henderson, his heavy footsteps, the near miss, the weight of what I had just done crashing over me like a tidal wave. The next few days, I avoided their house. I ignored Tyler's texts about our next tutoring session. I told myself I needed to let it fade, to put distance between us before things spiraled even further. But then, on the third night, my phone buzzed with a message I shouldn't have opened. "Mrs. Henderson, come over. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my throat. I should have ignored it. I should have walked away. But I didn't. When I arrived at the house, she was waiting at the door, dressed in an oversized sweater and leggings, her hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked younger like this, almost fragile, and that scared me more than anything else. "Are you insane?" I hissed, stepping inside. After what almost happened, she shut the door behind me and exhaled sharply. "He doesn't know," she said. "I swear. He came home early because of some work issue, not because he suspected anything." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "That doesn't mean we weren't reckless." She crossed her arms, watching me closely. "Is that what you think? That this was just some reckless mistake?" I hesitated. I didn't know how to answer. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You felt it too, didn't you?" I clenched my jaw. "That doesn't mean it was right." "Right?" She let out a bitter laugh. "And what's right? Staying in a marriage where I feel invisible? Pretending everything's fine when it's not?" Her words hit me like a gut punch. I saw the cracks in her carefully constructed life now. The loneliness, the yearning, the quiet desperation in the way she looked at me. But it wasn't just about her. "Tyler, Mr. Henderson," the weight of it all pressed down on me. "I can't be the one to fix this for you," I said finally. "You know that, right?" She smiled sadly. "I don't need you to fix it. I just—" She trailed off, her voice breaking. "I just don't want to feel alone." For a moment, I wanted to hold her, to tell her that I understood, that I wasn't sure if what we were doing was about love or escape or something in between. But then, before I could say anything, we heard a car pulling into the driveway. "Mr. Henderson." Panic shot through me. She grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the back door. Go. Now, she whispered urgently. I hesitated. I wanted to say something, to ask her if this was the last time, or if there would be more, if we'd already gone too far, or if we had only just begun. But there was no time. I slipped out the door just as the front one opened. As I hurried through the dark yard, my heart pounding, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. Not even close. Part 5. I tried to stay away after that night. I really did. I ignored her messages, dodged Tyler's calls, even switched up my usual routine so I wouldn't accidentally run into her at the grocery store or the gym. But no matter how much distance I put between us, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she looked at me that night, the way her voice trembled when she said she didn't want to feel alone. And then, just when I thought I was in the clear, it happened. A text. Mrs. Henderson, we need to talk. Please. I should have deleted it. Should have blocked her number. Should have done anything except what I did. Stand outside her house an hour later, staring at the warmly lit windows, knowing full well that stepping inside meant stepping deeper into something I might never escape. But before I could knock, the door swung open. It wasn't Mrs. Henderson. It was Mr. Henderson. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at me, his face unreadable. Then he stepped aside. Come in, he said. My stomach dropped. This was it, the moment of reckoning. I hesitated for a split second, then stepped inside, my mind racing through every possible way this could go horribly wrong. The house felt different. Darker, heavier, like it was holding its breath. He led me to the kitchen, where a single glass of whiskey sat on the counter. He poured himself one, but didn't offer me any. You've been avoiding us, he said finally, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I swallowed hard. I've been busy. He let out a short laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. Right. Silence stretched between us. I was waiting for it. The punch, the accusation, the demand to know what the hell I had been doing with his wife. But instead, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. I know. 2 words. Just that. I gripped the back of the chair, my pulse hammering. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled, slow and knowing. You think I don't see the way she looks at you? The way you look at her? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Do you love her? The question stunned me. Did I? I had never even allowed myself to think about it in those terms. Mr. Henderson exhaled, shaking his head. Doesn't matter. Because this... He gestured vaguely, as if indicating something much larger than just the two of us. It never ends well. I felt sick. So what now? He downed the rest of his drink, then set the glass down with a thud. That depends on you. I frowned. What do you mean? He studied me for a long moment. Leave town. Walk away. Forget her. A lump formed in my throat. And if I don't? His smile was cold. Then I make sure you do. The room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. I wanted to argue, to tell him that he had no right to make demands about a marriage that he had clearly neglected. But deep down, I knew he was right. Nothing about this ended well. Not for me. Not for her. So I made my choice. The next morning, I packed my things. Told my landlord I was breaking my lease. Left without saying goodbye to anyone. Not Tyler, not my friends, not Mrs. Henderson. I drove until the town disappeared in my rearview mirror. I told myself it was for the best. But some nights, when everything is quiet, I still hear her voice. I still see her standing in that dimly lit kitchen, looking at me like I was the only person who had ever really seen her. And I wonder, if I had stayed, would things have been different? Or was I always meant to leave? I guess I'll never know. The end.